So once again, I'd like to thank you and our panelists for joining our program today. This is the 7th of an 8-part series of webinars. I'm Kathy Magruder. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland Clean Energy Center. We want to take this opportunity to recognize our series sponsors for their support and sponsorship to produce these sessions, which have covered a key range of topics in the current advanced energy landscape. Constellation is our voltage sponsor. Happy to have them on board. We've also included the Nuclear Powers Maryland organization, new to our list of sponsors. And we're always pleased to have Siemens, one of our voltage sponsors. Siemens is based in Beltsville and employs a number of people in Maryland. Cone Resnick, like to give special thanks to them for supporting the 2021 Connecting to the Energy Economy Speaker Series as our power sponsor. And again, it's my pleasure to welcome a very distinguished panel of experts in the field of workforce. Full bios for all of our speakers can be viewed online at www.mdcleanenergy.org/speaker series. This program will look at the renewed focus on advanced energy economy and addressing the impacts of climate change, workforce readiness, diversity, and availability are all challenges that we need to address in this space. The session will focus on approaches, programs, incentives, and the people providing solutions and assistance to support evolving local businesses. You've had a chance to meet Troy Stovall. Troy LaMail Stovall is the CEO of TEDCO and leads the organization's mission to support economic development through the cultivation of an inclusive entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. Troy's professional experience over the last 2 decades includes highly visible leadership positions in investment management, telecommunications, information communication technology, management consulting, and higher education. He most recently served as the Chief Operating Officer of the University of the District of Columbia and founded several entrepreneurial ventures, including the management consulting firms of LaMail Stovall LLC and GTMS Partners LLC. He was also co-founder of an investment firm, Gulf South Partners. Troy is a recognized expert on entrepreneurship, venture capital, higher education administration, and economic development. He's a prolific speaker and author on these topics. He earned his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering from Southern Methodist University, as well as a master's in computer science from Stanford, go Cardinals, and an MBA from Harvard University. Welcome, Troy. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate you. Appreciate that welcome. And I always tell people, you know, when people hear about Stanford, it's cardinal, it's the color, not the bird. It's an interesting because the mascot is a tree.
At least I knew it was a cardinal.
Yeah, don't try to make the connection there because you'll hurt your brain cells trying to make the connection between the tree and the color. So as I said, thank you again, Kathy. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. And you mentioned my time at higher ed and UDC. So I have a passion for this. Because I come from higher ed. I've spent a number of years in higher ed, but I've also been in the investment side of this and as an investor. And so as an investor, you know, one of the things we talk a lot about is, and I learned this when I first got into the investment game from some of the very famous people in Silicon Valley near Stanford, was you always invest in A quality people that have a B quality plan and never the reverse, never B quality people with an A quality plan. But the corollary in that is those A quality people with the B quality plan have to be able to attract an A quality team to them. And in order for them to attract an A quality team, the obvious point of that is it has to be available. There has to be a pool of that talent available. And there has to be the ability for an individual to get the accessibility to that training so that they can be in the position to be part of an A team, to be part of an investment, an early stage investment team. So as we talk about what's happening in this clean energy space, as we begin to make this real pivot towards a sustainable infrastructure, which has the ability to support our homes and our businesses and our infrastructure around clean energy, we have to also talk about how we pivot individuals into that and be ready for that. And so we have our team today to talk about, as Kathy said, what is happening, what's that pipeline look like, what are some incentives for that, and what are some real programs that are happening out there. But before I introduce the panel, I want to say one other thing that Kathy brought up. Look, I am as Zoom fatigued as all of you are. I think we're all beyond. I was having a call this morning with someone that was they thought it was on Zoom. And I said, there's this cool new technology called a telephone that you can still use to communicate. And so I know we're not together, and I pray we will get together soon, but let's try to make this as interactive as possible. And so we got folks that will be watching the chat box. Please speak up. Please let us know. Yes, we have some questions we want to ask one another, but this becomes a far better conversation, both for us and for you, if we have your engagement. So I really am asking for your engagement on this thing. So with that, we've got a great cross section of folks here today. I'm going to walk through each of them, let them introduce themselves and their organization. But I'm also going to ask them to ask them and be brief, because we want to spend time in the conversation, but kind of their passion, why today they're here today. What is it about workforce and this workforce readiness that brings them to this point today to talk about it to you and to all of us? So with that, let me first introduce from Pepco Holdings, Kellyanne DeCurtis. Kellyanne? Did we lose you, Kellyanne? Come back, Kelly. We'll get, there you go.
Okay. Now? All right,
there you
great.
Go.
So thank you so much for, first of all, hosting this panel today. And I'm just really interested in learning from everybody else here. And as we get questions, to your point, Troy, I always learn a little bit, more, because people make us think a little bit different. So I'm welcoming and looking forward to questions. So Troy, I'm Kelly DeCurtis. I'm the Director of Talent and Workforce Development for Pepco Holdings. Pepco Holdings is primarily based out of Washington, D.C., but we have 3 utilities under our umbrella. So we have Pepco Holdings, Delmarva Power, and Atlantic City Electric. And I support the programs across those 3 utilities. We can talk more, and I know there's more questions that will get into some of the work that we do, but specifically about the passion and, to focus on the workforce development, although I do feel like I have the best job in the company, and I think some of my colleagues are on the call, so I'll have to watch that later on. But, I primarily want to talk a little bit today around our workforce development and really making sure we have work-ready individuals for our positions and where the industry is going to be going in the future. And you talked about A-quality people and having a pool of A-quality people. And I think it's, also creating that pool and developing folks so that they can be that A-quality employee that we want. So I think a big focus for me and what I'm passionate about is making sure that I'm helping individuals figure out that these careers are for them, understanding how they can bring the right behaviors to work, and how they can get skilled up so they can come into these really life-sustaining jobs that we have available in our field. So I'm pretty passionate about that. At the end of the day, it's about really creating job opportunity. So very rewarding work.
And I love your title, Director of Talent. I mean, that's the whole point, Director of Talent, because it's not about human resource, it's about Director's talent and the acquisition of that talent. So thank you, Kellyanne, for being here today. I mean, yes, we're going to talk much more. One of the cool things about my job at TEDCO is I still get to engage with the higher ed sector quite frequently and quite deliberately. And so has spent quite a bit of time with our friends in Western Maryland and Frostburg, and very happy to have Al Delisle here on the line with us today to talk about what he's doing there in Western Maryland and with Frostburg. So Al, take it away.
Thanks, Troy. It's good to be with everyone this morning. And you asked about our passion. My passion here at Frostburg State University is to help the region improve itself economically and in all aspects of the quality of life. And we think going forward that a key component of that is renewable energies, clean energy. And we are really at the beginning of that wave, if you will, in terms of adopting renewable and clean energy in Western Maryland and throughout our region, which includes parts of Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And the reason for that is because we're in coal country. And when you look at coal country and you look at the energy and the energy costs that we have here, there is no place lower in energy cost than in the country, than anywhere else in the country. So our passion is if we can demonstrate that clean energy works in Western Maryland and our surrounding region in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, it will work anywhere. And in order to prove that it works, there are three components that we have to really work on in the region. One is we have to attract new businesses to the area. We have to demonstrate to the marketplace that clean and renewable energy is the wave of the future, and it is a good wave for the future. And three, as you mentioned in some of your opening remarks, Troy, the pandemic has really shown what's happened in the general workforce in terms of work shortages and so forth. And so it's no surprise that with all things in business, they start and end with the availability of a workforce. So it is incumbent upon us as a university, working in very close partnership with our other higher education partners at community colleges, at Hagerstown Community College, Allegheny College in Maryland, and at Garrett College. And Brad, you're welcome for the shout out to your constituent institutions. But working together, we're developing a continuum of workforce education and training for that future workforce, regardless of whether we're looking at 6-week certification programs for vocational workers, or we're looking at 4-year degree programs at university or beyond to PhD programs to help do everything that's going to be needed in the clean energy workforce. So we're excited about that, and I look forward to the conversation with the group today.
Al, that's a great, I love the lot of the words you said, that the continuum. I like this idea of what's happening with the coal country. You and I've talked about, I mean, look, if you guys can figure it out in the coal country, that will just set the bar for so many other places in the country about how that transition from, let's call it the legacy economy to this new economy is going to take place. So I really appreciate that. So staying in that theme, and since you already called him out, I'm going to call in Brad Phillips. Again, I think, as we think about, all due respect, because I've worked at a lot of higher education institutions or 4-year institutions, and they produce obviously some outstanding talent, but the community colleges play such a vital and central role in this in this notion of workforce and really understanding what the workforce needs are, because their ability to pivot very quickly, the ability to get people out in a much faster time frame than the 4 years can. So it's really important. Their role here is extremely crucial. So I'm very happy to have Brad Phillips here today. So Brad.
Yeah, thank you, Troy, and thanks, Al, for teaming me up very nicely. And also thank you, Kathy, and your team from the Maryland Clean Energy Center. My name is Brad Phillips, and I'm the executive director since July of the Maryland Association of Community Colleges. And we represent 16 community colleges, which have 23 campuses across the state in every community, thousands of sites within those communities, 24/7 learning opportunities, virtual or other modalities. And we really do feel like we're sort of the backbone of Maryland's economy in so many ways. And I think when I read the charge of this morning, I thought, well, this is exactly what our mission is to build the workforce, be prepared for the changes in the economy and the renewable advanced energy sector in a way that is actually bringing opportunities to people that are underserved or underrepresented in the current system. And Troy, you gave me the charge, so I'm going to take a minute to explain this, and I'm going to use a metaphor that came to my mind as we've been talking, but both of my kids play soccer. And when I think about what they want to play, they all want to be the striker. Well, Maryland in some ways thinks about this workforce issues in the same capacity without any sort of acknowledgement of the team as a whole. So everybody wants their picture with the striker, and everybody wants to think that that's the person who wins the game. But it really is a whole team. You have offense, defense, you have a goalie. And we need to actually build out the support for the whole team to grow Maryland's economy. We've known for a long time that the jobs that we've lost when we've had these economic downturns in 2008 and the one that we're currently in because of the pandemic, if you're going to build Maryland's economy back, it's going to have to be building it back for the whole community. And we're there in those communities, serving those underrepresented interests in these exact topics. We've changed our curriculum. It's not just in renewed energy. It's become sort of, we've taken on a leadership role in our communities in this regard. And Al, you've talked about it. We're partnering with your institution. We're partnering with other businesses and opportunities across the state. So again, thank you so much for having me here, and look forward to getting into this conversation as we go forward.
No, thank you, Brad. And again, just keying on some of the things that you said, particularly for our community colleges, for our listeners. If you don't know this, the great thing about community colleges, they are in every community, the community college, they're in a community. I think that's the key word in the community college. They're in the community, and they're able to represent the very localized workforce needs of that community. And they, again, the ability to pivot and connect is so very important. So that doesn't take away from what our friends like at Frostburg do, but the ability to be there on that ground level in those communities, I think is so vital, Brad. So thank you, and all the community college, which leads to, you also talked about a team, and that leads us to Grant. All due respect to the 4 years and the 2 years, they don't control all of the learning pedagogies, the learning possibilities that exist in the state. And as Brad pointed out, we need to have a team, and we have to think more holistically about how do we channel the right and how do we have the right platforms. And so, Grant, you've got this great platform through IEC and what you guys do there at IEC. So I want you to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about IEC and your passions.
Thanks, Troy. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists and all our guests. As Troy said, I'm Grant Schmelzer. I'm the executive director with the Independent Electrical Contractors. We are a trade association of over 160 different companies that employ over 15,000 electrical workers across the region. We're affiliated with our national association, which happens to be in Arlington, Virginia. But we are one of the largest chapters of IEC. And we are the largest 4-year electrical apprenticeship program in the state of Maryland. As Brad said, the community colleges partner with businesses. Well, we partner with 6 different community colleges across the state. We are based here in Laurel, Maryland. However, we have facilities out by Al in Hagerstown and all the way down to Southern Maryland, north to Baltimore, and everywhere in between, basically, and of course in Virginia and Pennsylvania as well. I'm excited to be here because my passion is really helping individuals find the right career, not a job, a career. That's what's key. You know, my day job is with IEC, but when you talk about passion, I have, under the last 3 governors, served and currently serve on the Maryland State Apprenticeship Council. I also chair for the Hogan administration, the Youth Apprenticeship Council, and we are really helping, I'll say, our fellow Marylanders to find careers. We, with our over 1,000 apprentices in the state, we've turned our attention to seeing what we can do with young people to help them, because many of them are recognizing the fact, especially the pandemic brought this to light, that there are other career opportunities out there. So we are currently partnering with Howard, Montgomery, Anne Arundel, Charles counties, public schools. We're taking seniors, getting them some work experience during their senior year and transitioning them out into part-time employment while they're working and getting paid. We're expanding that program to Prince George's County this coming school year and Calvert counties. And, you know, that's what the future looks like in my mind, is how can we work with our K through 12 systems, work with individuals who know what they want to do, get them some experience while they're still in high school, and transition them into the workforce a lot faster, because that's what we're all struggling with as an industry is how do we meet the labor demands in this region. The electrical industry is facing a worker shortage of about 14% by 2025. And all of this work that we do with the Maryland Clean Energy Center is relevant because when you talk about electric car charging stations, solar, all of that is electrical. So I've been serving on the Maryland Clean Energy Center for a number of years, and I'll continue to do so because we feel that we're integral to the success of the Clean Energy Center and getting our message out through multiple means. So I want to thank everybody once again and turn it back over to Troy.
No, man, you didn't know, it's a great lead in, I think, to my first question, Grant. So I appreciate it, because each of you've talked about, obviously, because I pose it as a passion question, but the question now, and it's kind of following for Grant just kind of ended us, is, and Brad did as well, there's a lot of good things that are happening here in Maryland to prepare our workforce for this clean energy future. And let's be honest with ourselves, that clean energy future is still evolving. There's still pieces that are still coming together, and we still, Kelly, under Kelly, you have to service what I call this legacy. You still have to worry about workers for the legacy infrastructure as you transition to this potential, well, not potential, but what this new one looks like. So my question is, what's working? What's one thing that's really working well in Maryland in the preparation and the development of that workforce? This is for all four of you. And then what's still missing? What's still missing? So what's working to kind of bring this workforce, and what's still missing? Al, I'm gonna start with you.
Thanks, Troy. I just wanted to unmute myself. I think what's working is that we are beginning to look at the continuum of worker needs, all the way from that vocational, that electrical worker, all the way to the PhD engineer who's going to be designing the systems that we're going to be implementing. I think the part that's missing, I'm not sure that missing is the right word, it's probably just not as robust as it needs to be, is that when we talk about clean and renewable energy workforce, we're not talking just about the people who are installing the equipment or designing the equipment. For anything, there are three components that we really have to consider, and that is, one is the technology. Does the technology work? Absolutely, it works, and it continues to be improved with every passing day. Two, though, is the political or regulatory environment. You could have technology that works, but if you have a regulatory environment that doesn't allow that technology to be widely disseminated, you're not going to make the impact, you're not going to make the change in society that we're all trying to make. And third is the finances. Yep. Doesn't matter if the technology works. Doesn't matter if the regulatory environment allows you to deploy that technology. If it's not financially viable, it's not going to get into the marketplace. It's not going to make the change that we all want to see. So when we talk about workforce development, I think it's important that the part that perhaps is not as robust is the inclusion of those other two pieces, not just the installation of the technology, but the education and training of the regulatory piece, the policy piece that allows for this stuff to be put in place, and the education and training of those members of the workforce who are going to use their pencils and make this work from a financial standpoint. And all three of those portions of the workforce are necessary. And that's part of what we're doing at FSU. We are, I was going to say knee deep, but we're probably more like thigh deep in renewable energy and clean energy on our campus and in our region. And what we found is some of the students that we are using, for whom we are creating internships, come out of our business school or come out of our College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, not just folks who are technically minded and are interested in the technical aspects of workforce development.
I appreciate that. Ray, I want to pivot to you the same question, but I guess maybe I'm going to overlead you a little bit because you've got the complexity of these multiplicity of communities across the state to think about my question, right? And so I don't know if it's a fair question, but I'm gonna still pose the same way. How do you think about it? What's working and what's missing?
Well, I think what's really been working well for the community college segment is, you're right, there's regional workforce needs, local communities, local economies, and each of the colleges are working and partnering with those local workforce needs and industries. And we've really revolutionized, I think, that not just our offerings to fit sort of these criteria. I mean, we're thinking really broadly here. I mean, we're changing the way we're teaching our culinary arts programs to go after, foods with less pesticides or locally grown. And we're changing our landscaping programs so that we have more low maintenance yards. And that's impacting the way we're even teaching some of our golf course administrative programs. Mm-hmm. All of that's been built out. I made a mistake a decade ago thinking that green jobs and renewable energy jobs were a subset of what we're doing. They're not. They're integrated into everything. Apprenticeship opportunities, our coursework and credit and non-credit, and we've really done a good job of building that out. And I think Al touched on some of the issues that we're facing, is getting the legislature to understand, or our funding streams to understand. We're really good as a state building from soup to nuts how students access higher education from pre-K all the way up through PhD level. And if you follow that trend all the way through, you're going to be okay. But what about the people that don't fit into that? Well, our average age of a student is 25. A lot of them have been displaced. A lot of them may not be accepted into a highly selective or a selective institution. But if they're given an opportunity, they can actually thrive and become a part of the middle class. They can have a sustainable quality of life. And I think connecting that with our funding streams and getting acknowledgement from legislature in a lot of ways to really understand the value and the asset that our community colleges bring to the state. And we continue to work on that.
Gotcha. Thanks. So Grant, you know, what you do is you're kind of in the middle of all this, right? You're seeing the job, you're seeing the students, you're working with higher ed, and you're doing all these pieces. And so you really are at an interesting kind of nexus point of all that's happening here, right? So what's your perspective on kind of what's working and what needs some fixing?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, what we're seeing is people, I'll say particularly parents, are reevaluating the advice that they're giving to their children. You know, we were deemed an essential industry. The construction industry was. We did not stop moving. Most of the, thank God, and we didn't have to use them in Maryland for the most part, but most of the COVID hospitals, temporary hospitals that were built by our members.
Oh, wow.
So we had to deploy electricians all over the place because most of our members built those hospitals. And I think that really resonated with a lot of parents as we're continuing to see the increase in cost for, I'll say, traditional four-year colleges. What's resonating with individuals is, you know, do I really want to make this investment in a four-year degree anymore? Can I get a degree that's relevant to what I want to do with my life? And then can I continue to get industry recognized credentials to advance my career? And when we say advance, we're talking about earning more money, right? I mean, that's what it boils down to. And then you couple that with the fact that going through an apprenticeship program in many cases, you can still earn credits towards an associate's degree. So you can have, at least in the electrical industry, the best of all worlds, and even go on to own your own business or go into, I'll say, different parts of the electrical sector, going on to Pepco or BG&E. They've actually hired plenty of our graduates from the apprenticeship program. And they're facing the same shortages that we are. I mean, Kelly can probably go on and on and on about it, because a lot of times their industry is longer term employment. They have people that work for them 20, 30 years, and their industry is graying extremely fast because all those people that have been with them for 20 or 30 years are now getting close to retirement.
Absolutely.
We're a little different because you can be out in the field and then come back into the offices and do things like estimating or do project management. And I'll say our region is very unique because we have a lot of government institutions that have electrical departments, Office of the Capitol, Social Security Administration, all of our hospitals, all of our universities. So when I quoted that number of about 14% labor shortage, I actually think that number is even higher. So there's plenty of opportunity. We just want to recruit and cast a wider and wider net and let them know they can have it all here in the electrical industry.
Well, you brought up two things I'm going to come back to. You mentioned credentials, because I do want to spend a time on that, and we'll just touch on wider net, but I obviously want to bring Kellyanne into this. And, you know, Kellyanne, you're the receiver of all of this talent development that happens in our higher education, whether at the 4-year, the 2-year, or at an IEC. And so, but you also have your own training pedagogy, I know there at PEPCO as well. And so you're just as much part of the training cycle that needs to happen. But what are you seeing that is working for PEPCO, and what are some challenges? What are the one thing you still need to see happen better?
Yeah, there's a lot. And actually, I'm going to reverse your question if you don't mind.
Okay,
I'm going to go
please.
with a challenge. And it was something that Al, you said, that continuum of the positions. I think that's one of our biggest roadblocks or hurdles is understanding of these roles. You know, there are the line folks, our customer service, customer care individuals, and those are most of the jobs that our customers see or our community members see, right? They see the person out climbing the pole, putting the electric back on, very happy to see that person, right? They see or they hear the person they call when they need, to find out when the lights are coming back on or how to pay their bill or whatever it might be. And I don't think they understand the breadth of positions that actually go behind all that. You mentioned the electric, the EV chargers, you mentioned the solar, you mentioned new business that goes into, our work. The regulatory side of the business is huge for us, right? Our government facing individuals who deal with the policymakers and understanding what's going on there, right? My positions, those types of roles, and quite frankly, the number of engineers that go into this. So there's all of that happens. And I think a big part of this is building the understanding, and our community members, especially those in our under-resourced communities, understanding that these jobs are for them, and how do we create those pathways, whether it be through maybe a community college program, whether it be through one of my workforce development programs, whether it be through, a 4-year, institution, who knows, or a grant through your program, right? But for us, it's about building that awareness and building that understanding so people can see themselves in these jobs. And that's been a big focus of our work. And to Grant's point, we need to accelerate that because, of course, we do have folks that have had 20, 30, 40-year careers. Grant, I'm going to add on to that are fabulous and wonderful employees, but we also have to anticipate that they're going to, leave us at some point, and we need to be ready for that. So I flip that to kind of go through the challenge. On the positive, I do think we have momentum with our partnerships with some of our community college partners, with our workforce development programs, building that pipeline, and of course with our university relations. I think that's going to accelerate as more and more people retire and enjoy that retirement that they've earned. But we need to accelerate that a little bit more and build that understanding.
Thank you. So I just, particularly as Grant was talking, but you as well, Kellyanne, I'm reminded of my own career. So it was mentioned that I started out in telecom, and I did. I started out the I have to say the old Southwestern Bell, which doesn't exist anymore. And I have climbed my fair share of telephone poles. I have been in ditches looking for telephone line cables. And to your point of the continuum, and I think that's the point, that too many times we allow when people hear workforce, what they're really thinking are entry level, the lower end jobs. And so you're clear from Troy, we're all a part of the workforce. If you've got 2 PhDs, you're part of the workforce. And so I think we have to think through, I think as all of you said, that there are opportunities, and being able to let someone see their career, and I forget who said it, see their career and the career trajectory in that, which brings me to the question around, Grant, you talked about a wider net. How do we cast a wider net? In this last year and a half, we've been dealing with COVID. We've also had kind of this larger, awakening and ration of that. There are people who have been left behind. There have been people left behind, and whether that's based off of gender or race or even geography. I think sometimes we don't talk enough about the geography separation that's happened in our economy and job creation. And I know Al will talk about that, particularly like in Western Maryland. But Grant, when you said the wider net, what were you talking about there? Talk a little bit more about your wider net.
Yeah, I mean, it really boils down to, if you have children in the state of Maryland, I think most people can resonate with this. It's what college are you going to? Most high schools are, wear your college sweatshirt today on wherever you're going to go to attend. They list, how many students are going to college. They don't talk about, how many people are entering into their careers. So it's a rebranding effort that I think is well underway, especially when it comes to Maryland Department of Labor and the Office of Apprenticeship. When you go into MVAs now, there's going to be a big plug on the screens talking about apprenticeship opportunities. So we really do need to educate, I'll say, the citizens of Maryland and cast that net that these are great paying jobs. Troy, to your point, yeah, it may be an entry level job to start, but we all have to start somewhere.
Yep.
Going into a registered apprenticeship program, generally within 4 years, most of the programs are 4 years, specifically in construction. Some may be 3, some may be 5. You're going to double your salary, double it, if not grow it even faster. I mean, if I would have known that, and I may have made some different choices in life. You're continuing to see, CTE enrollments grow. There's a little bit of a hiccup. Some of the data will show because we couldn't get out and sing the words of the gospel during the pandemic. I think that had a hiccup to it. You talk about the Kerwin report on the political side, right? A lot of the findings of the Kerwin report were to increase investment into CTE training.
Yep.
Or career and technical education,
right?
Work-based learning opportunities. A lot of those are occurring in many of our occupations. And to Kelly and Al's point earlier, there are so many different on-ramps and off-ramps in the construction industry and in this renewable energy economy. It's hard to keep up with it. And I'm in the industry every single day. So there's sales positions on all the product that's out there. There's engineering positions. There's inspection positions. There's so much out there.
Absolutely. Kelly, you said, thank you for that, Grant. You mentioned that someone has to see themselves in that role, right? They have to be able to visualize themselves. Spend a little bit more time. As you were saying that, I'm reminded, I'm not trying to make a pitch for them, of some of the recent commercials that the military have been doing recently, where they show someone, kind of in a military doing some stuff, talking to their parents as if it's kind of a dream-like state. And then they transition and say, Mom, Dad, this is why I'm wanting to do this. But they visualize themselves, into that. They projected themselves into that future through the commercials. Actually, I think are very well done. But talk to me about what you meant by that, by being able to see themselves in that role.
Yeah, I think that's it's a great follow-up. I think that most of the time when we think about utility jobs, and I like to say energy jobs, but I'm going to put the old paradigm of just utility jobs. It was typically, you got into the company because you had a relationship somehow, some way, and quite frankly, we weren't as focused on diversity as we are now. So, when I'm thinking about folks from our communities who might be thinking about these jobs, they might not have seen that as a pathway for them. These are longstanding jobs, again, 20, 30, 40-year careers for a lot of individuals that come into these jobs. And the folks that they were seeing out and about in the street were not the folks that look like them. So, we really need to change that paradigm, and we need to make it real for people to see that these are pathways. We can give them the training. We can give them the job readiness skills. We can teach them about safety. We can help them get their CDLs if that's what's required, whatever it might be. Or we can help them also on their pathways, to a degree, if they're thinking about an engineering program or coming into some of the other positions that Grant mentioned. We all have those same type of positions. So, just creating that visualization so that people understand that this isn't just for whatever they might be thinking in their head, that this is actually for them. And I think that's been a real win for us. We've been able to bring individuals in and show them what careers look like, show them how they can enter into these careers, and they see then, that visualization of themselves in those roles. And that's been really powerful for us.
Gotcha. Brad, Grant mentioned this notion of credentials, right? And I know that's a big deal now in community colleges, and being able to, and when I was in higher ed space, we used to talk about, the challenge, for many folks, particularly when we're talking about someone that's 25 years old, is they can't go full time. They can't go full time back, and live in the residence halls or whatever. But they want a pathway to be able to, get enough to get a job, get more education to get the next job, and kind of build their way to potentially a degree, maybe an associate's or a bachelor's or whatever it is. But talk to folks about this notion of credentials and what the role the community college is doing around its credentials. And I'm gonna do a double question on you, because as particularly as Kellyanne was talking, and Grant too, I'm old enough to remember, folks, the days of VOTEC, the old VOTEC schools. that, for the most part don't happen anymore. But I just have this feeling that they're coming back. They're slowly making their way back in a new way and form. We're calling them coding boot camps, or we're calling them credentialing schools, or whatever we're calling them. But that notion of creating a vocational technology training is making its way back. You want to talk to that, Brad?
Yeah, that is a good topic to have a discussion on. You can go from micro-credentialing to badging to, just let me back up.
Yeah.
The credentialing, if you look at it from a community college opportunities, you can go into obviously associate degree pathways, and there's stackable credentials all up and down what you might be eligible to do with certificates and building on that. You have career associate degrees, you have transfer associate degrees, which could go into a four-year institution. But then you also have credit certificate programs. And then you have our non-credit offerings, which are non-credit licensure and certification opportunities, where you can take the testing that you might need from an exterior testing company, but you're getting the training at the community college. And some of these areas are a course or a sequence of courses that you can start, even if you already have a bachelor's or a PhD. You can get this credential, and it can give you a leg up into a new area of opportunity or employment. And they don't take long to get. And for a lot of students who are looking for a short-term credential that does add value, you can come to a community college for a semester or take a number of courses, and you can have an opportunity that you might not have otherwise. We also have, we're really expanding what it means to have apprenticeships. Now, Grant's talked a lot about a registered apprenticeship opportunity where you're working with the Department of Labor, but there's also youth apprenticeship opportunities that we're looking at doing as well, and internships with local businesses that might also help students, once they finish that internship, get a job. We also have, trying to find the word for it, we have P-Tech institutions that work with our local employers and the high school. We have middle college opportunities, and sort of what Kelly, you were talking about, since the blueprint, and Grant, I think you mentioned it too, if you're college and career ready in 10th grade, you're going to be given an opportunity to explore and see what you might actually look like in some of these credentials, Troy. So you can go into an apprenticeship and have that opportunity, or you can take a licensure or CTE and take it at no cost to you, just to see if you can see yourself in that position. So these credentials are key to, I think, filling in the workforce needs of our state.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Brad. And Al, that really leads to you in my mind. How is, we talk about the role of the 4 years in this, and Frostburg specifically in Western Maryland. How are you seeing this playing out, this whole credentialing and badging, and how has that impacted how Frostburg is thinking about its education program?
Sure. And I think similar to what Brad talked about, four-year institutions across the country are thinking about credentialing, whether it's a micro-credential, a badging, stackable credentials, and so forth, in much the same way that community colleges are. In fact, we're working with our community college partners in the region to be able to create that continuum. So you may be able to start at a four-year school and go to a community college to get that specific credential that allows you to do X, or vice versa. You may start with a certificate program at a community college and stack that on other credentials that you're getting, or go into a four-year program at Frostburg State. I think the reason that that's all happening, and this is not, I don't think, well known outside of kind of those of us in the field, but companies largely don't care anymore what your degree is. They don't care that you have a four-year degree in fill in the blank, or a two-year degree in fill in the blank, or a PhD. What companies want to know is that you can do the job for which you're being hired. And if proving that you can do the job means that you do it on the job, or you prove it by getting a credential that says, I'm certified to do X, that's what companies care about. So I think the whole spectrum of what it means to be in the workplace is changing, because the competence that you have to do that work that leads into a career is what counts. It's not whatever academic institution that says you've got a degree now. And academic institutions are realizing that, which is why you have places like Frostburg State that are beginning to stack credentials towards a 4-year degree, that are beginning to create badging programs and micro-credentialing programs, so that the students that come to us, whether they're a traditional student or a mid-career student, are able to take that learning that they get from us and go to a company or to an employer and say, I can do what you need me to do, and I can do it well. That's a big change in the workplace. And it really does harken back. I think Kelly was talking about this before in terms of some of the employees that they had, which became employed by the utility company because they had a connection. It's kind of harkening back to that same kind of dynamic where employers want to see performance, not a degree. A degree can help determine that you have the ability to perform, but it's not the be all end all it once was.
So I'm gonna take that right to Kelly. You're the corporate person here. React to that. React to what Al just said.
Yeah, Al, first of all, that means a lot coming from somebody who works at a 4-year degree program or college institution. You know, and first of all, I'm making notes as we go along. I'm going to be looking at badging programs and micro credentials after this call, so I appreciate that too. You know, it is interesting that, you know, there's that saying, you know, get up, dress up, show up, right? You know, that that's half the battle, right? We will teach you the skills. We will train you. I mean, Grant, I'm sure you know, it takes constant training of new technologies, new things, making sure people are safe out there in the field. So I think there's a lot to be said for what Al was just talking about. There's the will of people who come into our workplace, and that's what we're really looking for, are individuals who can, you know, come in the door, show the will. You know, we have high demanding careers. You know, it's you know, we're very weather dependent, as we all know, right? As well as just the fact that we're emerging technologies, and, you know, we have to stay on top of all of that. And, you know, I just want to go back to something, Brad, you said around students. And a big part of this is education for the middle school, the high school individuals to see these careers. But a lot of it's also, you know, folks, again, from our under-resourced communities that just don't see this as a career path for them. And then, you know, maybe in their 20s, 30s, you know, even later, trying to figure out what they're still going to do. And that's where we can also come in and show them there's a pathway here, and we can help them with that. So it's all angles, really. You know, it starts at the middle school and high school for those that we're, you know, going to be trying to attract in that way. But it's also understanding from our community members that this is also a pathway for them. So there's a lot there, but you know, the get up, dress up, show up is half the battle. And I think, Al, that's what you're really talking about.
Al, you want to comment?
Sure, I think Kelly is right. Yeah, and I think one of the things that we cannot lose sight of is we've got, 8 billion people on this planet. And we probably have 8 billion different kinds of passions and interests that those people have. And we need, as a society, to really be focused on giving the pathway, the ability for each of our people in this country to pursue the path that they want. College is not for everybody. Community college is not for everybody. Nothing is for everybody. So when we're talking about creating the opportunity for a workforce, we need to create multiple pathways to allow different people and different interests to be expressed down those pathways, whether that is for a technician or whether that is for some PhD engineer who's going to design the system that is going to be put into place and employ all these folks, or whether it's for a lawyer or a politician to figure out the policy that's going to allow that to work, or an accountant or an MBA to figure out how you're going to make it pencil out. So I think we have to design systems that allow multiple pathways to match the different interests and passions that we have throughout our population.
Well, Al, this is to all of us. Whoa. Get some background there. Can Al, why don't you silence, see if that'll help? That'll help. Thank you. I agree with everything you guys are saying and ladies are saying. I guess what I'm thinking about, you got me talking notes, I'm taking notes as well, Kelly, is that we're talking about the systems and the programs to get someone in a position to be able to do that. But there's a whole psychology here, because Al, you just said college isn't for everybody, community college isn't for everybody. But there is this mindset among certain parents, particularly for those, for certain underserved markets, that it is about going to college. It is about, and so there's a whole, I would argue, and I'd like anybody to respond to this or agree or disagree, that there is almost an educational piece that has to be shown of that these pathways exist that may or may not include the traditional 4-year or even 2-year, type of pathway. And so, comment on that there's a whole generation that has to be shown that there is a different pathway, and it's not just the military either, that there's other pathways to success that may or may not include through higher ed.
I think you're exactly right. I think there are other pathways, and a big part of the education process, I think, is with parents who have in their own minds, and I'm a parent, what success is, their own definition of success from their own experiences and careers. And therefore, they project that onto their children and say, in order for you to be successful, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. And very often that means you've got to go to college, you got to get a 4-year degree, and that defines success. I will tell you, though, that not every individual needs to go to college. Not every individual needs to go to college when they're 18 years old. Yes. I have 2 children. I have 2 sons. I have a 27-year-old who's doing a master's degree, and I have a 31-year-old who's gone back to get his bachelor's degree because they went through different paths in their lives, and they've decided at different times, this is what's right for me. This is what's going to work for me. And some people choose different paths, and we ought to allow for that to occur and provide for them the opportunity to learn and become trained to pursue the path that they want to pursue at that point in life. It is no coincidence that we're seeing record numbers of non-traditional students come back to school, whether it's community college, whether it's a certificate program, whether it's a 4-year or more degree program. It's because they've taken different paths in life and now have gotten to the point where this is the path they want to take now. We just need to be more flexible in what we do to educate and train people for their careers and for their jobs.
It's beautiful. Anybody else want to? Yeah, Brad, please.
Yeah, this is a hard one for me because I have a little bit of a different take on this than Al, and maybe because of our traditional mission at community colleges. But I really think that the way we do talk about higher education is missing the reality of where we are as a nation in the 21st century. And what we're referring to with all these different credentials that we have, not just an associate's or a 4-year baccalaureate degree, we're talking about credentials past high school that are embedded into the workforce needs of our economy now. Those don't necessarily require a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, but they do require some form of post-secondary education past high school. There's plenty of research on this topic coming out of Georgetown and the Center for Workforce. And
Workforce, right.
Yes, that all of the jobs that get lost when we have an economic downturn that don't come back are those that have not required any type of post-secondary. They're their low-skilled type of jobs. When you look at the high-skilled needs of the economy in Maryland, we're overproducing sort of the high-skilled job market as far as degrees. It's the middle skills that we're talking about that are building this renewable infrastructure for our state that we really have to build on. And those are going to be apprenticeship opportunities. They're going to be all sorts of different, a blend of credentials that will really make our state prepared for the current economy in the 21st century.
I love it. Anybody else? Any comments on this one? We got a few questions that have come through. Grant, thank you for answering one of them that came through. Appreciate you answering the question of Brian. Jake has a question. I'm just going to read. I think it's an interesting one. It actually leads into a question I'm going to ask. It says, buildings and homes account for a substantial chunk of greenhouse gas emissions in Maryland. What are the opportunities for the state to focus on advancing workforce development in residential energy efficiency and building performance? Who wants to take that one? Thanks, Jake, for the question. Anybody want to take that one? Grant, you unmuted. You answering?
Okay.
Oh, Kelly. Go ahead, Kelly.
I'll let
Go,
Kelly
Grant.
go. I was going to try.
I'll start off, Grant. Yeah, let me see if I can feed you. Maybe that'll help out. This is a tricky one because I think a lot of work that's being done in energy efficiency space is more retrofit, of what's already existing. Not that, as new build happens and that sort of thing, energy efficiency isn't a factor, but, a lot of our programs right now that are out there, are looking at how do we, help our customers lower their electric bills, use their energy more efficiently, conserve in different ways, because we are going to be building an infrastructure that's also going to be putting more usage of electric out there with charging stations and the like, and electrification of cars and, bus fleets and that sort of thing. So I think a lot of the work that's going on out there is really training people of how to do those energy efficiency programs. And I know in some of our workforce development programs, specifically in New Jersey right now, that's a big focus for us, right? As New Jersey's rolling out a number of programs and making sure we have individuals that know how to do the audits, that know how to interact with our customers. Customer service skills are a big deal, right? And really just understanding that whole labor market. There's also a lot of work right now being done in urban settings of the existing dwellings, especially again for some of our harder hit communities and under-resourced communities, around making those buildings more energy efficient and helping out people with understanding how to do some of those things that they probably think is unattainable for where they are. You think about putting solar panels on your house, that's a pretty daunting expense, right? But there's a lot of things that people can do to cut their energy bills. So I'm not really answering Jake's question directly. I think it's more of how we're educating customers and retrofitting a little bit, less so around maybe some of that new construction that I think Jake might be asking for. But Grant, does that maybe help with what you were thinking about?
Yeah, it is a tricky one. I'll say that, Kelly. My take on it, and it may be somewhat jaded because it impacts, part of the industry that I represent, is there are a lot of workforce development initiatives for existing occupations. Whether it be the HVAC industry, the plumbing industry, or the electrical industry. So, my best advice is, and I'll give a plug for Anne Arundel Community College, because there's a lot of COVID money out there. A lot of the community colleges are leveraging that for scholarships, and a lot of the workforce development entities are leveraging it for, I'll say, career changers, because these are individuals who in many cases have been displaced due to COVID, where if they qualify, the tuition is basically free. My advice to, especially if we have any job seekers on the phone, is to contact your local community college and talk to them and get some career counseling. Because we actually just started about 3 weeks ago an electrical pre-apprenticeship class, and we have 17 students in the class. If you hear banging, they're getting ready to go into the lab right now. And that's the 5th class that we've done in the last about 18 months of pre-apprenticeship. And we have about a 75 to 80% placement rate, those that complete the training in there. So, my advice, or my twist on it, is a lot of the opportunities when we talk about the residential sector and addressing the greenhouse gas is it's going to be existing occupations that are going in and evaluating the homes, and existing occupations that are going to make those changes to those structures to make them energy more efficient.
So you said a couple of things in there, Grant, that I want to circle on. But the first one I want to circle on, and it's really more of a question to Brad, as these apprenticeship opportunities and others things that you talked about from the community college how do students pay for them? Do they have to use the federal student loan program, grant assistance? Let's talk, kitchen table conversation with folks that need to know if they want to do something tomorrow, how are they going to pay for it?
Well, this might, for me, be one of the most important questions, because we've talked a lot about changing the perception of what it means to go to college or what it means for post-secondary education. But a lot of the way that this is built out is built on a traditional way of thinking about higher education. State financial aid, federal financial aid is changing somewhat, state somewhat, but it's primarily for students going into credit programs and associate degree pathways. And it is very rarely ever given to students in some of these non-credit pathways that we're talking about. Registered apprenticeships are different. Employers pay for that student to do so, but the state could also be providing more incentive funding to help employers have apprenticeship opportunities as well. But we're really trying to change the perception of policymakers at the federal way all the way down, that you need to make sure that you're not excluding opportunities for people that may have no interest in getting an associate's degree, or really just need some sort of certificate of value that will help them become sustainable members of their community and not have to borrow money for these programs. Grant is right. Now is a great time for students to take advantage of some of this COVID relief funding we're getting from the federal government, because in a lot of ways it's been detached from sort of the traditional way in which financial aid has been awarded, and it's emergency aid to students, and we can do with it in things that we haven't been able to do. So I think that is something that we continue to wrestle with and try to change, is the perception of how to provide financial assistance to students in some of these non-traditional credentials.
Well, you bringing up, go ahead, Grant, please.
Yeah, let me, Brad, I'll give you the new card since you're still relatively new, just to share with our participants. So it is not all employers do pay for apprenticeship programs. It's up to the individual apprenticeship program on how they're structured. So I want to make that very clear to our participants on here. Now, what the Hogan administration has done over the last almost 8 years, is they have started to provide significant opportunities for the business community to leverage funding. I wish Director McClarion was on the phone. I know some of the folks from the Department of Labor are on here, so hopefully I don't mess this up. But currently, right now, employers can apply for Maryland Business Works, and I think Sabrina was going to have some of those links teed up for us to put in the chat, where employers can be reimbursed 50% for the cost of training for apprenticeship programs, and also the tax credit. So it's virtually free for a lot of employers to invest in their employees. So in my opinion, the key is, if we have individuals who know what they want to do, it's the work component, is finding that employer, starting to interview with those employers. And the employers have a lot of opportunities to leverage existing funding that the administration has freed up. Also, I believe it was last Wednesday, the administration announced $3.2 million that is now available to companies that bring on new hires, that put them into apprenticeship programs to supplement the wages for those new hires, because they don't have a whole lot of experience. So I think the narrative is shifting dramatically, more so than I've ever seen in my 25 years of being in this space, to be able to leverage different resources and utilize those resources.
And thanks for that, Grant. And that link is in the chat. They just put it up, so appreciate you bringing it up. And all four of you have been talking around, I think we're going to look back in history, and we're going to see this time in our history as an interesting transition, as we're transitioning from these legacy systems or this legacy way in which we've had this energy, or legacy way in which we funded higher education, or legacy way in which we delivered higher education, Al, to whatever this new model is going to be, both for energy as well as for educational and paying for education. Brad, I guess my question is, how are we going to make this transition? Because it's a tough transition to make, because you're trying to ask people, Brad, to participate in something where maybe Grant, you gave us some great examples, but it's the system still doesn't 100% support that. And Kelly, I guess it's again someone who's done some work for us. You're training people on these legacy systems, these analog systems in many cases, but they've got digital systems that they also have to support at the same time when they come out into the working world. And so this is a question for any of you. How are you balancing at your various places that you're employed at? How are you balancing this, dealing with this legacy versus trying to plan for and prepare for the future?
I mean, for IEC, it's about, and Troy, I'm gonna pick on you for a second because you were in a legacy industry before. So,
absolutely,
from IEC's perspective, we have evolved to either the creation of new programming. So, for example, Troy's industry, former industry, I'll say, we have now created a low voltage apprenticeship program. So we offer a 3-year low voltage program on data, emergency systems, including fire alarm, nurse call stations, and the low voltage industry of it all. To Kelly's industry, in terms of more of the higher voltage side, we now have an interim credential called the National Cable Splicing Certification Board's medium voltage certification. And I happen, as one of my other volunteer jobs, I sit on that board. So I think back to, the points from both, Brad and Al have made, is the community college roles does have a role in terms of preparing individuals to obtain these credentials, along with private sector organizations like myself to be able to do that. So I think this is how it's continuing to evolve. You mentioned coding earlier and some of the other IT occupations. I think what we're seeing is the business community recognize, hey, I want to be able to have these stackable credentials and then moving people through the pipelines.
Absolutely. No, I think that's right on, Grant. Anybody else, Al?
Yeah, I think Grant is right on target. And I think that this transition requires us to be flexible and inventive in how we move forward. I met just about a week ago with a senior executive in the automotive industry. And the automotive industry has a goal of 50% of all new cars sold by 2030, that's 9 years, will be electric cars.
Yep.
Okay. 50% of all new cars will be electric cars sold in this country by 2030. We don't have the charging stations set up and down the interstates and the side roads and in our neighborhoods to be able to deal with that.
Nope.
We also don't have societally the habit of sitting around and waiting for 20, 25, 30 minutes to get our cars refueled. So there are lots of things that have to happen. And when we're talking about workforce, there's a whole different set of skills required to just simply maintain those cars and service those cars, because you're not changing or repairing the carburetor or all of those things. And for a time, we're still going to have to service carbon fueled cars, gas cars. They're still going to have engines. They're still going to have carburetors and catalytic converters and brakes and so forth. So this is, to Grant's point, where stackable credentials and new certifications really come in, whether you're talking about a certification program at a community college or even a badging program where you get certain things that you are capable of doing on your way to a 4-year degree, where you can take a technician who can change the oil on a car and teach her how to then work on a car battery, or how to deal with whatever it is on an electric car that needs to be dealt with. So we really have to do the transition by being able to provide the additional skills and certifications to allow people to move with the technology, to move with the progression in society that we're expecting to make. And I just use the car industry as just one example. We're going to have a transition, and we're going to have to make a lot of change throughout society to make that transition happen. And we can't just simply say, well, starting today, we're only going to train folks who can work on electric vehicles, because that will leave the millions and millions of cars that are not electric stuck with nowhere to go, quite literally.
Absolutely. Before someone else jumps in, I'm reminded this in the last week or so, the Ford CEO announced that Ford is going to, over the next, to your point, next 10 years, they want to be known as a technology company, not as a car company. That's her 10-year vision for Ford, to your point. That more than half the cars that they make will be electric to your point, 10 years. That's a huge transition in 10 years. Anybody else want to jump in on this? Kelly, please.
Yeah, so Troy, and I think well, first of all, Al, I think that corollary between the auto industry and having to still understand how to change the oil and also understand whatever electric cars are going to need is a perfect example of what we're doing right now. And it's interesting, and Troy, I just want to follow up to something you just said. We want to be seen as an energy company, right? We're not the utility company. And it's again that same type of Ford model. Like, who do we want to be known as, right? And what we're building towards. And the question around the energy efficiency roles, we have a couple programs right now where we have the traditional skill building, and for those of you who might be in the industry, there's a lot of tests that go along with that to be able to get into some of these jobs. And so we still train and we still prepare people for all that. We still, obviously, safety principles, that's, always going to be a factor. But then we're layering on some of these other things. And every iteration, every class I've had from our workforce development programs, we're constantly building something else new in, because it's changing so quickly. And, right now, like I mentioned in New Jersey, we're building in these energy efficiency curriculum that, is something, quite frankly, we're learning about, so we're trying to get up to speed. We're getting our teachers up to speed and making sure that we're prepared, even though the jobs are just emerging now. They're going to hit us hard, and we need to be prepared for that. So I think it's a constant evolution. And Brad, I see you nodding. I know that we've worked with a number of the community colleges, and we're just asking for more and more. And one of the things that we will be talking about with one of our partners is that EV technology. So our fleet department is going to be transitioning to all electric vehicles. That sounds great, right? But right, do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the folks that can repair those vehicles? Do we have the right amount of charging stations? Do our customers, know what that's going to look like? And it's going to be a lot for us to get there. And Brad, I saw you just come off mute.
No, I'll be quick, but you're exactly right. And I just want to emphasize that this transition, it's almost like a change in the social contract that we're all living under, where it's a new future and we're building it now, but we also have to maintain the old system, kind of what you were saying, Al. But to change, so just sticking with the theme of automotive mechanics, that's an expensive program or expensive to teach, and we don't share that. Not every community college has that program because of the expense of the infrastructure it takes to teach that. So we're going to have to figure out a way to maintain that system, as well as layer on this new conversion into electronic vehicles and build out that infrastructure and the needs of the community around that to make that sustainable and make that work. So it's going to be getting people sort of with the old social constructs to realize, and this is a challenge of education in itself, that we need to prepare and plan for what's next and building out the community, building out the needs for the sustainable and energy efficient future.
Love it, love it, love it. We had a question in the chat as we are getting close to the end here. Let me read it. This is from Scott. So thanks, Scott, for the question. What is the best way for us in the private sector to engage or start a discussion with existing education providers, develop a new micro-credential program focused on energy efficiency? Excuse me. Given the forum, I'm asking this question generally, but FYI, my company specifically focused on sales enablement for high efficiency HVAC and electrification technology in the small, medium-sized commercial building sector. Thanks, Scott, for the question. Anybody want to take that?
Scott, I'll take that. The good news is a lot of us have these energy HVAC technology programs already, but if anybody on this webinar or has something that they want to build out, we do contract training with thousands of different industries across the state of Maryland to build exactly what it is that you want your workforce to do. So Scott, I just say work with your local community college with your workforce needs, and you can have a tailor-made curriculum for your employees or whatever it is that you're looking to do. So there should not be any reason anybody gets off of this thinking that what exists now is the only thing that's available. We'll work with anybody and any employer to make sure you have the skills necessary for your industry.
Gotcha. Look, we just have a few minutes. I want to do a quick, just kind of lightning round. And the lightning round question is, what happens tomorrow? What do you want to see happen tomorrow? Grant, I'm gonna let you start us off in this. What's got to happen tomorrow?
You know, I'll be very optimistic that we are making the right steps and investments. We have seen, we are growing our programs by about 12% a year. I'd like to see it creep up a little bit more. I think the conversation and dialogue with our K through 12 partners is happening. I mean, granted, some of that has been a result of legislation. You know, I think we're on the right track, and Rome wasn't built in a day, and this problem isn't going to go away in a day. I mean, this is a long-term problem, but I do believe, and as I mentioned in my opening comments, we're in the Mid-Atlantic. We are servicing many different states. I think Maryland is way more advanced in what we have done as a state to meet the needs of our citizens here, to continue to grow this sector, to train our citizens in these career opportunities. So Troy, I don't know much more that we can do. I think we're really kind of kicking butt.
I appreciate that. Brad, what's tomorrow?
Well, Grant, I agree, and I'm optimistic as well with everything that you just said. My one area of concern is that we make sure that we're providing an opportunity for those that have been left out of the traditional paths, making sure that those that have been underserved, low-income students, have the ability and the access and can afford to actually take advantage of the opportunities that we're building and creating right now. So I think that's one of the things that starts today and tomorrow and the day after that.
Cool. Thanks, Brad. Al, what's tomorrow?
Well, I agree with both Brad and Grant. I'm generally optimistic about the direction we're heading. I think for us to really take full advantage of the future, we have to continue and expand our ability to communicate with one another. And by us, I mean government, education, and the private sector about what each of our needs are. And I think what's critical is each of us in those three sectors, government, education, and the private sector, I think we have to be willing to let go of what is starting to stop working. And that's going to be difficult, because all of us, I think, as human beings, are very reluctant to stop doing something that's been comfortable. And we're heading into a period of transition where some discomfort is going to occur. And we're going to have to be willing to deal with that and do so in a cooperative way.
Like taking 20 minutes to charge up your car.
And there may be other solutions, but we have to be open to those other solutions.
Kelly, you started us. You're going to close us out.
Yeah, I think I'm going to just summarize what's already been said, and I think there were some great answers, but I think it's a little bit of curiosity, awareness, and willingness. You know, I think there's curiosity about these jobs, understanding what's out there, which also is incumbent on us to build that awareness or that curiosity. The awareness that these jobs are for folks, and Brad, to your point, from our under-resourced community members, from our folks that don't see these as career paths, we got to create that. And then willingness to try this, because it's also very scary. And Troy, when you're thinking about climbing up the pole, that's a little daunting for some folks, but there's a lot of jobs in this industry. And I think if folks are willing to come in and learn and understand and get some education around it, there's some really great opportunities for them. So I'll summarize it by curiosity, awareness, and willingness.
Brad, Grant, Al, Kelly, thank you. Appreciate your comment. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for the questions out there. Kathy, appreciate you as well.
Thank you, Troy. And to the panel, really great conversation. So much that I heard this morning that really matters. That we're, I think, to repeat Grant, it's not necessarily a job, it's a career. And I think it's important. My experience has been you start off in one direction, but you may end up in another, and that everything that you do leads you down the path to where you're supposed to be. Brad, I heard you say this is a change in the social contract. You know, we're all clear that the only thing that's constant in this world is change. So, you know, as we evolve, and we need to evolve, Al, I heard you say this communication between government, education, and the private sector is key. And that's what you all are doing here this morning. We're happy to be in the place where we're facilitating that. Kelly, I really appreciate your time. Troy, you're a great moderator. Before we close out, I want to mention that we want to thank our audience for joining us today. Please take a minute to answer a couple of questions and share your feedback on our survey. We want you to know that we have one last program on the 18th of October focused on innovation and the advanced energy economy. I think it'll be really fascinating. We have some great panelists, including the CEO of BGE. So please plan to join us for that. We also want to announce that we are preparing for our 2022 legislative reception to be held at the Governor Calvert House in Annapolis on Thursday, February 17th. So please mark your calendar for that date. It'll be from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. This should be a hybrid event, so we can allow for some in-person networking, as we talked about earlier, as well as remote attendees to hear from our guest speakers on the climate and energy priorities under consideration in the policy arena. Details will be announced shortly. So once again, thanks to our panel, and thanks to our moderator, thanks to our audience. We look forward to seeing you on the 18th as well. Good afternoon.